Greetings, everyone. My name is Emmanuel, and I would like to welcome you to our program today. We are continuing with our series on rebuilding a new Africa through decentralization. And our topic today is when there is no righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations, politicians will likely use government institutions as instruments of oppression and tyranny against their own people. That is why it is important for the church to preach and to teach and to promote righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations. Now, what is righteousness? Righteousness has to do with God's ethical standard that refers to, right relationships with God and then with other people in our communities and in our nations, irrespective of their social status. Now, what is justice? Justice has to do with the equitable and impartial application of the laws in our communities and in our nations. You see, we have been created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, we must treat and respect other people because they carry the image of God in them. But where there is no righteousness and justice, politicians will likely use the institutions of government as instruments of oppression against their own people. As human beings, we have human rights. We have the right to peacefully protest against the injustice that we see in our communities and in our nations. We have the right to petition the government. We have the right to hold political leaders accountable for their actions and their decisions in government. But you see, when citizens exercise their democratic right to peacefully protest or to hold elected officials accountable, the elected officials who are corrupt will not like their citizens to question their actions in government. As a result of that, they will likely use the institution of the police to oppress their own citizens. You see, we see that in many countries in Africa and around the world when citizens go out to peacefully protest against the injustice that they see in their communities and in their nations, their governments will mobilize the police to disperse peaceful protests. Our governments will mobilize the police to arrest and detain peaceful protesters. In a community where there is no righteousness and justice, politicians will use the institution of the police to oppress their opponents. They will use the institution of the police to go after citizens who are just exercising their democratic rights. In a nation where there is no righteousness and justice, politicians will use their power and authority to oppress their own citizens. In a nation where there is no righteousness and justice, the legislators will legislate unrighteous laws. In a nation where there is no righteousness and justice, the judicial system will be corrupt. In a nation where there is no righteousness and justice, there will be political oppression, there will be economic exploitation, there will be social discrimination, there will be corruption, there will be violence, there will be kidnappings, there will be killings, there will be tribalism, there will be nepotism, there will be racism, there will be all kinds of evil happening in such societies and nations. That is why it's important for the church to preach and to teach righteousness and justice. But where there is righteousness and justice, there will be peace and prosperity. Where there is righteousness and justice, there will be national development and economic prosperity in those nations. Where there is righteousness and justice, there will be economic stability. There will be development. There will be roads. There will be hospitals. There will be schools. The literacy rate will be very high. There will be industrialization. There will be development. There will be prosperity. There will be peace. There will be joy in that nation. But when there is unrighteousness and injustice, people will be mourning. People will be crying. There will be poverty. There will be sufferings. There will be underdevelopment. There will be violence. There will be kidnappings. There will be all kinds of evil going on in those communities and in those nations. That is why the church must promote and teach righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations. For us to rebuild a new and prosperous Africa, we must promote righteousness and justice. You see, where there is no righteousness and justice, our politicians will likely use government institutions to oppress their citizens. Where there is no righteousness and justice, the legislators will make unrighteous laws. Where there is no righteousness and justice, there will be corruption in the judiciary. That is why the church must promote righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations. For us to rebuild a new and prosperous Africa, we must promote righteousness and justice in our communities and in our nations. Thank you so much for watching this video. We are going to continue next time. Until then, bye-bye.